Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into a historical powder keg. You asked about the 1956 Suez Crisis. You threw some fascinating material our way,
Yes.
including an episode from Mr. Hutchings History.
Right.
And we are ready to unpack it all.
Yeah.
Buckle up, because this event shook the world stage and set the scene for decades of superpower maneuvering.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a classic case of multiple forces colliding, colonialism's last gasp, the rise of new power players, and of course a whole lot of oil at stake.
And you wanted to understand how this relatively short crisis echoed through history, which, spoiler alert, it did.
Yeah.
But to really get a feel for this, we need to rewind back to 1956. Picture this. One of the world's most vital shipping routes suddenly changes hands.
Wow.
We're talking about the Suez Canal,
Right.
a lifeline for global trade,
Right.
and especially for that sweet crude oil flowing to Europe.
Yeah, the Suez Canal at that time was a legacy of waning British and French influence in the region. Control over it was a huge part of their global standing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And into this picture steps Gamal Abdel Nasser,
Yes.
the charismatic leader of Egypt. He's all about Egyptian independence and needs some serious cash for a massive dam project on the Nile, the Aswan High Dam. His solution,
What's he going to do?
nationalizing the Suez Canal.
Bolt doesn't even begin to describe it. Nasser's move was a direct challenge to the old world order. It was a way for Egypt to take control of its own destiny and its resources. Remember, this is just after World War II. The old colonial powers are reeling, and here comes Nasser throwing down the gauntlet.
And this wasn't just about Egypt flexing its muscles. This was a huge deal for global trade.
Yeah.
Suddenly, all those powerful nations used to getting their oil through the canal were in a very precarious position. It was a wake-up call, to say the least.
It was a sign of the times, a changing of the guard on the world stage. The old empires were fading, and new players like Egypt were demanding their place at the table.
You might be thinking, okay, Egypt takes control of the canal, big whoop, right?
Yeah.
Oh, but here's where things get spicy. Britain and France, who were not happy about losing control of this waterway, decided they were going to take it back by force if they had to. They even teamed up with who had their own ongoing tensions with Egypt.
And this is where things get even more interesting. The British, French, and launched a coordinated military intervention, a secret invasion, hoping to catch Egypt off guard and regain control quickly.
You said it, secret invasion.
Yeah.
Except there was one tiny detail they seem to have overlooked.
What's that?
Their biggest ally.
Their biggest ally.
Ding, ding, ding. The United States.
Yeah.
Can you imagine being President Eisenhower and finding out your buddies just launched a secret invasion without even a heads up?
Let's just say he wasn't throwing a congratulatory party.
Yeah.
Eisenhower was fuming. Not only had his allies gone completely rogue,
Right.
but this whole mess risked dragging the Soviet Union into the Middle East.
Yeah.
Talk about a headache you don't need during a global power struggle.
Especially during the Cold War.
Oh, yeah.
The U.S. and the Soviet Union were locked in this high-stakes game of chess for global dominance. And the Soviets were all about backing anti-colonial movements.
Of course.
This was their chance to make the West look like the bad guys swoop in and gain influence.
Yeah, it must have felt like a betrayal for many newly independent nations. Here they are trying to break free from colonial rule.
Right.
And suddenly it's the West using military force to assert control. The Soviets must have been licking their chops.
So Eisenhower had to walk a tightrope trying to rein in his allies while preventing the situation from blowing up into a full-blown Cold War showdown.
Yeah.
Talk about pressure. What did he do?
He got strategic. Instead of sending in troops, the U.S. took the issue to the United Nations, demanding a ceasefire and condemning the invasion. They also brought out the big guns, economically speaking, and threatened to destabilize the British pound if they didn't back down.
Wow. Talk about putting your money where your mouth is. Did it work?
It did. Faced with international condemnation and pressure from their most powerful ally, Britain and France were forced to withdraw. It was a blow to their prestige and a sign that the times were changing.
Okay, so Britain and France are out of the picture. But what about they were a key player in this intervention as well?
You're right. Withdrawal took a bit longer,
Okay.
but they eventually succumbed to the combined pressure from the U.S. and the UN. The Suez Crisis was a turning point. It showed the world that the old colonial powers were losing their grip,
Yeah.
and the U.S. was the new kid on the block calling the shots.
The world was shifting on its axis. So after all this drama, what were the lasting consequences? I mean, besides from some seriously bruised egos.
Well, for one, the Suez Crisis cemented the Middle East as a Cold War battleground, with the U.S. and the Soviet Union constantly vying for influence. It also highlighted the crucial role that oil played in international relations, something that is still true today.
Right.
But one of the most significant outcomes was the Eisenhower Doctrine.
Ah, yes. The Eisenhower Doctrine laid down in 1957. It's like Eisenhower looked at the chaos in the Middle East and said, all right, enough is enough. Here are the rules.
Exactly. The Eisenhower Doctrine was essentially a warning to the Soviets. Any nation in the Middle East threatened by communist aggression could count on the U.S. to come to their aid.
Wow.
It was a clear message. Don't even think about it.
A line in the sand. This was a major turning point, right? The start of a much more interventionist U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East.
Absolutely. And as we know, that policy has had far-reaching consequences shaping the political landscape of the Middle East for decades to come. But the Suez Crisis wasn't just about geopolitics and global power plays. It also had a profound impact on the people of the Middle East themselves.
That's what I was thinking. It's easy to get caught up in the superpower drama.
Yeah.
But this was real life for the people living in these countries.
It fueled nationalist sentiment, giving a voice to those who had long been marginalized under colonial rule. But it also exacerbated existing tensions, creating divisions that continue to resonate today.
It's a stark reminder that these historical events weren't just headlines. They were people's lives. You know, people who had families and dreams and went to the market and...
Absolutely. It really puts a human face on it, doesn't it? It's a cautionary tale about the unintended consequences of foreign intervention. Even with good intentions, meddling in complex situations can have ripple effects that last for generations.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Exactly. The Suez Crisis shows how deeply intertwined history, politics, and human lives really are. You can't separate them.
You know, going through all this with you, it really hits home how this one event, the Suez Crisis, set off a chain reaction that still echoes today. It wasn't just about a canal or even just about oil. It was about a fundamental shift in global power with consequences we're still grappling with.
It's a perfect example of how a seemingly isolated event can have global ramifications. And it underscores just how crucial it is to understand history, its complexities, and how it continues to shape the world we live in.
It makes you wonder, what if things had gone differently? What if the Suez Crisis had never happened? How would the Middle East look today? How would the balance of power in the world be different?
These are the questions that historians and political scientists will be pondering for years to come. And that's the beauty of history, isn't it? It's not just about the past. It's about understanding the present and navigating the future.
It certainly gives you a lot to think about. So there you have it, a deep dive into the Suez Crisis. We saw how a regional conflict quickly became a global power struggle, forever changing the political landscape and sparking consequences that are still felt today.
It's a stark reminder that the past is never truly past. It shapes the present and influences the future in ways we can't always foresee.
Exactly. And on that note, keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.